Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me and thank you for subscribing to my channel if you have. If you have not subscribed just yet, please do hit the subscribe button. You don't even have to pause to do that. So guys, today I'm sharing a very simple recipe. I'm cooking beef stew. And I thought to share this because I'm using a couple of my flavor packing hacks. So this is completely simple to make, but the choices that I've made with the little ingredients that I've added on here ensure that it tastes like you spent like the most amount of time doing the prep. So the prep doesn't take too long. The cooking time, however, is low and slow, and so that takes a couple of hours, but you're literally not touching it. It's just sitting in the stove, just bubbling away at the lowest temperature. So yeah, man, I'm really happy about the way this recipe always turns out. I've used it a couple of times now, and I thought now that I've perfected it, I should share it with you. Now, this recipe gives you that feeling, you know, that feeling where you're like, did I cook this? Did I cook this? And you're so excited. That's exactly how I feel every single time I have it. And so I want to share that feeling with you. So if you do try the recipe, I promise you're going to love it. You will absolutely love it, okay? So without getting sidetracked or anything, let's get into the recipe. Like I said, it's quite simple to make and very simple ingredients as well. So let's get into the recipe and yeah, hope you get to try it. We start off by browning our stewing beef. Browning is basically the process where you take your raw meat and you have it in a hot pan with a bit of oil just to sear off the outside. So you want all the sides to be browned off just a little bit. This helps a lot with the developing of flavors. I know a lot of people start off beef stews by just boiling the beef, the stew down. You can do that, however, this ensures that you're packing in the flavor from the get-go. So a lot of the beef flavor is injected into the stew by doing this step, and browning meat also helps with the end result, the color that you end up with your stews. You won't have that dull looking stew at the end. It'll look nice and rich because of the step. So you brown your meat at first and then you set it aside. This is not to cook it fully, it's just to brown the outside, hence browning. Now we are just chopping the onion. So it's one whole medium-sized onion that's gonna be sauteed in the same pot that we've just seared our meat in. I'm showing you the step that I hardly ever show in my recipe videos because I wanted to show you just how easily I'm able to chop an onion, literally less than 30 seconds. And the reason for that is because I have the correct knife for the job. So just to reiterate the importance of having the right kind of tool for what you're doing. If you need more information on this kind of thing, please do go on to my video that I posted for the tools that I think are super important for the kitchen. I will link it right above here. So yeah, it literally, that's it. That's the half done. I'm going to do obviously the other half following this, but that's all it is. Additionally to having the correct knife, always leave the bulb at the end of the onion because that keeps the onion together while you're cutting it and it's not a mess. As you can see, I've kept it at the end and it ensures that while I'm cutting, my onion stays intact. It's another pro tip that you can use when cutting onions. Another quick job. I am not speeding any of this up because I wanted you to see it in real time. That's it. Very happy with that. So as mentioned, we're using the very same pot we were using to brown our meat. We have not cleaned it or anything because all those black bits are flavor for our stew. So we just add the chopped onion on there and saute it on. So I'm just going to stir it a little, and you'll see it starts picking up the brown bits that it collected on at the bottom from the meat. I nearly said the floor, so funny. But as you can see, it literally cleans it up immediately. But we saute that for a bit. It doesn't have to be cooked all the way because we have a long cooking process ahead of us. Now we add 1 small to medium red pepper. You can use any kind of pepper, green pepper or yellow pepper. I just chose to use the red pepper because of the color. I am obsessed with a richly flavored and colored stew. So I look for ingredients that will contribute to that deep, dark color at the end. Red peppers are one of those ingredients. So I add that onto the sauteing onions for it to saute as well. I'm stirring my pot throughout because the more I do that, the more I get rid of the bits that are still stuck to the bottom and getting them up there. Because if you leave them at the bottom, they actually burn and they affect the flavor of the stew because they have that burnt taste. You don't want them. So you want to have them picked up. So one of my favorite ingredients for a meat stew is the oyster sauce, which I've just added. I've added 2 teaspoons of it. Oyster sauce has basically, it's like a seasoning agent, but also it has this nice deep color. It absolutely lends itself to what I am looking for at the end. So it serves 2 purposes: seasoning and adding deep, rich color to the stew. Another ingredient that helps us with a deep, rich color at the end is the tomato paste. I'm adding a teaspoon of that. Tomato paste is always added at the beginning when you're sauteing your vegetables. The reason for that is so that it cooks down. If you add it at the end, it does end up giving your stew a funny taste. So I always prefer to add it at the beginning like I am now. Let it cook for at least 2 minutes before moving on. The next step is the garlic. I am adding a whole teaspoon of garlic now. I didn't add it at the beginning because garlic tends to burn. So you always want to add it just before adding items that have more liquid so that it doesn't actually end up burning too much at the bottom, which is what I've done here. So just stirring continuously at this stage. We don't want anything sticking to the bottom. Next, we add our tomatoes. I chopped 2 small tomatoes and that's what's going in there. However, you can use half a can of already chopped tomatoes for the step. Not a whole can, half a can. I don't like my stews being too tomatoey, if there's such a word. I'm following that with dry mixed herbs. A teaspoon of that goes into my stew. All my vegetables at this stage. I am using a curry paste from Woolworths. It's called Kandai. It has some garam masala, some ginger, and a bit of garlic, and you know that vibe. So it has all the flavors that I'm kind of looking for. So this is like a cheat and a shortcut into getting all the flavors packed in. So I'm using this paste today. However, this recipe does go on and works out perfectly without this paste. I normally just use coriander and cumin and maybe paprika at this stage, but today I'm using the shortcut. So a reminder, this doesn't have to be in the recipe. It's just something I am doing today. You can just go with the normal paprika, cumin and coriander, 1 teaspoon of each. So now I add the stock. I'm using the stock powder from Woolworths. You can use the Knorr stock cubes. If you're using the stock cubes, please use 1.5. So I am using the stock powder, but what I'm doing currently is I am just not wasting any of that paste from before. So to do the stock powder, obviously you follow the instructions, and the instructions say 1 teaspoon of stock powder to 1 cup of boiling water. And that's what I've done, and I'm added it on there. If you have stock that's already made or that doesn't need mixing, I would say a cup of that would do very well for this recipe. So as you can see, our stock is bubbling away, and I add some bay leaves. Also very important, as much as I've used the curry paste, I am not calling this a curry because according to me, there's a lot of different things that I've done here that point to this being a stew more than it is a curry. So for me, this is not a curry, it is a curry flavored stew, if that makes any sense. So once you've had the stock, you bring back the meat that was previously browned to the situation. So I'm using a bit of a tight pot, but I love these pots. I'm actually using one of my oldest pots, probably older than like 12 years. I've had this since I left the house. My mom gave me these when I was leaving. And these are hot pots. If you know, you know. So I also add an additional cup of water to this. And the reason I'm adding the cup of water is because I want the initial braising stage to have all my meat basically covered, but I don't want any more flavor added. So I didn't want to have like 2 cups of stock. I am basically just diluting down everything because I've already seasoned, I've already flavored. There's no need for more flavor. The cooking time varies between 2.5 hours to about 4 hours, depending on the kind of meat you got. For instance, mine took 3.5 hours because this was a home slaughtered beef, which is quite harder than what we get commercially. So this is what it looks like at 2.5 hours. As you can see, it's broken down quite a bit, but it's not exactly where it should be. Another important fact is that this is on the lowest heat your stove has. It is literally just bubbling very gently, and you let it sit there and do its thing. Don't do yourself the disservice of trying to rush through a beef stew. Give it its time, let it sit there, let it do its thing through the time. It's literally the most important thing about this whole recipe. The time does everything. So my little hack at the end, when I have about 30 minutes to go, is always to go in with the Jimmy's sauce. It's like a steak basting sauce. It has a bit of sweetness to it. I love adding this. I love adding a little bit of sweetness to my stews because I don't like my flavor to be one-dimensional. Now, you might think I don't want a sweet stew. Neither do I, but the addition of 1 tablespoon of the Jimmy sauce in my case, or if you have a Mrs. Ball's chutney or the sweet chili that we normally use, you can use a tablespoon of either of those, and I promise you it will, at the end you'll be like, oh my god, this stew is literally everything. So it just adds a little depth of flavor. And you'll notice I'm not adding it right at the end. I'm adding it 30 minutes before the end. The reason for that is I want it to cook down so that it's part of the stew and it's not just like this flavor that comes at the end. So whenever I'm not working with the pot, the lid is on all the time. Another important thing is that when I'm doing a stew, I don't manipulate the pot a lot, so you won't see me opening and stirring and whatever else. That's why I didn't include it in the recipe, because I do not do that. So at 2.5 hours, I'd hardly stirred the pot. I hadn't added any more water or stock. Because I have my heat on low, I'm not worried about it burning. That's an important thing. Leave it to do its thing. Also, the best kind of pots to use for low and slow like this are our beloved hot pots, which is the one I'm using. Also, another very good option for a pot for this kind of recipe would be a cast iron pot. The reason I'm saying this is because my other pots with like the thick bases and whatever else, I always find it doesn't work out as well. Even though my heat is low, it ends up having some, it gets burnt and then it affects the flavor of the stew. So the kind of pot you choose is very important. Obviously, you know your pot's best, but do choose one that will help you with the heat, not retain too much like the thick bases where even though it's on low heat, it's still burning. So be very careful about that. I was strategic in choosing this kind of pot to work with. After another half an hour to 45 minutes, this is my finished product. I am happy with the stew. You can see how thick it is. We have not used any soup powders or flour or anything to get to the stage. It is just by having been patient with the stew and letting it cook down and get to this consistency. I served mine with some steamed bread. I have tagged the recipe up here for you to follow if you would like that as well. That is it for this recipe. Ladies and gents, thank you for sticking with me till the end. I hope you've taken a few pointers and you will be trying this recipe out very shortly. It's the season for it, so it's actually part of the reason why I thought to show it now. It's the most hearty of recipes and you will love it. That's it for today, guys. Remember to follow me on Instagram at Kholiwe_cooks. Click on the round button here on the screen to subscribe to my channel and on the rectangular one to watch more videos.